Nation, thank you for watching or listening, however you choose to consume it. I appreciate it. I wrote an article recently on LinkedIn about what do sites really want, and this can branch off, at least in my head it did, into a whole bunch of separate topics that are somewhat related. And it also stemmed from Save Our Sites conference that I just came back from a few weeks ago in Oklahoma City, where I was on a panel for AI and then on another panel for technology. I was moderating those panels. And a lot of sponsors came up and asked me, like, basically the same variation of the same question: what do sites want? And I did a video on this in the car, just to summarize it because it was not on the podcast. Sites want different things even at the same time. Sites want different things at different times. Different people at the site want different things at the same time. There's no, it's the wrong answer. I know the tech vendors and the sponsors are trying to figure out how do we make things more site centric, more site friendly. Well, the natural thing is let's find out what sites want. It's a bad question because, well, it's a good question in the sense that it shows that they care and that they are trying to be mindful of solutions. But I think it's a incorrect question in the sense of it's not precise enough because sites you ask at that conference, which are basically smaller sites, there were some site networks. Even they don't have, there's no consensus on what they want. One may want streamlined invoicing, another may want standardized SOP template, another may want the ability to use DCT tools. Another one may want uh, AI that kind of helps them with data entry or other thing. I mean, it's unbelievable what the sites want. And then within the site, like I have a small site, Yuma Clinical Trials. We have 6 people, not counting the PIs. If you count our PIs, we have 12. That's crazy. We have 12, no, 13. We have 13 people, more or less. If you count the HR, 14. So we used to be small. Well, we're still small. You ask any of those 14 people, of which myself am one of them, what we want at any given time, you're going to get 14 different answers, I guarantee you. Now you'll get some themes. It'd be nice to have easier to enroll studies. It'd be nice to have fairer budgets. It'd be nice to have tech that works. Okay, you'll find themes. But when you want specifics, because these sponsors and vendors, they'll start with themes, but then they get specifics and the devil's in the details. So the point of that article was there are 4 core virtues. I call them virtues because I've been reading Greek literature lately. The proof is here. I've got the Iliad, which I'm actually listening to the audiobook, but I'm also reading uh, I actually recommend this book, the graphic novel, but I recommend the Iliad audiobook on Audible and get the one with the better reviews. The narrator, let me pull it up. If I go this far, I gotta finish it. The narrator it's by Penguin Classics on Audible. The one um with Penguin Classics. But basically, if you distill the site needs, all site sizes, into 4 universal virtues or principles, this is what you'll get: a strong and diverse study pipeline, contract budgets and timely payments, flexible and effective patient recruitment, and operational infrastructure that scales. Those are the 4 virtues. I try to distill it to the most simple things. I mean, you can extrapolate and go a lot more in detail and in depth on any of those things, or you can go way more wide and get a whole bunch of other stuff. But ultimately, if you have these 4 things taken care of, and you're going to say employee retentions, where is it? Well, if you have a tight operational infrastructure that scales, you're going to have employee retention. And if you have a diverse study pipeline, you're going to have employee retention and budgets. You're going to be able to pay them better. You get my point. Where it gets interesting for the tech vendors is when you start looking at, okay, the vendors that try to offer solutions to these things, what do they want? And it's easy to say, well, what they should want are to figure out these four universal needs and maybe more details within them. I understand it's a competitive marketplace, so they should find a niche and dominate that niche and do very well on that niche and then expand when it becomes organic and feasible to expand. But what it boils down to is when you talk about these vendors, you're talking about technology solutions these days. Back in the day, before tech was really like an everyday word, we had vendors, but we had way less vendors. We had like pragmatic vendors. I had like a driver because this was before Uber. So one of my vendors was a driver, and we actually had like like four drivers in rotation. This was before Uber, right? Uber came in, replaced the need for that, and now you actually have specific vendors that do this for sites, right? Concierge companies. So some of them sponsored Save Our Sites. The name's escaping me. I apologize. Another vendor I had back in the day before tech was a real thing was I would use off the shelf before a Salesforce like product. I would need a place to put patient database. Like it sounds crazy today when your EMR, electronic medical records, could be a patient database, or you have Creo that could be a patient database. But if you're on paper charts and your physician's using paper private practice charts, what is your database? And I bought off the shelf thing from Staples that was called My Mail List. I still remember. I had to program it all to fit our needs. It was not the best. It was clunky. It was probably not HIPAA compliant. I don't know. Back then, it wasn't even connected to the internet, so probably. If you ask Darshan, who's affectionately known as Baba Yaga, he would have told me that's terrible. But sites were doing this kind of stuff. The point is, the vendors back in the day, I had a dry ice vendor that would come deliver dry ice. I had vendors that would train my staff on phlebotomy. I had vendors that would, and then the vendors started evolving into tech companies. So tech would either replace some of these needs, like I explained Uber with the drivers or Creo with the patient database. I would also have vendors like independent contractors that would be patient recruiters that would go out into the community. These days they're called patient advocates. There's companies that actually do this now. But now you have tech companies that do this. Patient Ace is one that I own, co-founded with Rodnick. The vendors have become tech companies. Well, now we're entering another paradigm. With all the site consolidations happening and with tech advancing and AI coming into the mix, tech is becoming more ubiquitous. The sites themselves are becoming more tech companies. And so the tech vendors have to figure out how to stay relevant. And so they've been using this term for years. Hey, it's a symbiotic relationship. We need you sites to grow. We need to serve you. That's our core competency. You need us to continue innovating and to run your operation. You pay us, and it's a fair exchange. Well, now there's more competition amongst the tech vendors. Prices are going lower. Services are consolidating to the point where even some of these site networks are starting to build some of these tools in-house themselves, which are proprietary. Now, there's one company I ran into at SOS. I think they don't mind me going public with this because we did a podcast on it. Tilda. Tilda started as a private equity backed tech company, AI related, and I'll let you guys watch the podcast so you can hear from themselves. But basically, they provide fractional coordinator assistant services in the form of AI. They bought a site to have proof of concept. That's not a new occurrence. That's something that's been done by a few others. That gets you thinking, okay, well, is it still a symbiotic relationship if the tech vendors are buying a site to have proof that their tech works and is scalable in the real world? And the answer is no. The answer is what is Scarce is more valuable. And what is more scarce today is not more tech vendors, it's sites. And it's independent sites. That's what's more scarce. And as consolidation continues, and as more and more independent sites get rolled into PE-backed site networks, or like in the case of Yuma clinical trials, we're independent. My goal is to be the platform with a PE, with a private equity firm. If we ever go the route of private equity at my site, we want to be the platform. Otherwise, unless they pay me a ridiculous amount of money, okay, then whatever. Outside of that dream, really, I would remain independent because that you want to be, it's just simple supply and demand. What's more scarce is more valuable. And it's our services are not deflationary yet as sites. The tech vendor services are more deflationary. Now, what the tech companies have to do is to remain competitive is either improve their product to the point where there is no competition and they have a moat based on their unique value props where sites continue to pay for their service, or they drop their price, or some combination of that. Whereas sites, they're still commanding better and better budgets every year. Now, will there be enough consolidation to where there's pricing power from the site networks? That remains to be seen. To me, that's further off than the more immediate, this dynamic of the tech companies being a deflationary force for technology vendors. So, if we really want to unpack the site tech vendor relationship, it's not really a symbiotic relationship anymore. I want to say the vendors need the sites more than the sites need the vendors. And I don't want to say something like parasitic because I think that's too harsh. But we gotta be careful about the words we use because symbiotic truly means I help you, you help me. And yeah, at the essence, like the way that is defined today, you can argue that. But looking out just a few years further ahead, I don't know. Because what happens when sites themselves become the tech vendors? And so that's something we got to consider as well. Another thing we got to consider is how sponsors train sites. So this is something sites I know all complain about. And if I were to throw it in one of my four virtues from the article, this is going to be an operational infrastructure that scales. Because there's no way sponsors are spending this much money on their trials and their training is literally a CRA reading slides at a site initiation visit and then their training, and I'm using air quotes if you're listening on the podcast, is expecting the PI to train the staff, which is laughable at most places. If you know how things work at a site, no PI is going to train their staff. Even the best PIs, they're just going to be good doctors and make sure that their staff are getting trained, but it's rarely going to be from them. There's exceptions, I know. There's some of you out there. Well, actually, I am, and yeah, they're the exceptions, not the norm. Sponsors need to invest in like learning management systems that actually work. A few of them do it well, but it's just like in the land. It's like one of those things where in the land of the blind, he with one eye is king. Because even the best trainings that I've seen thus far are like learning management systems where they're like these videos you have to watch, but at least they curated the videos to not waste your time. And they've segmented the videos. So here's a video on adverse events of special interest. It's like 20 minutes. Awesome. I actually love that. And the fact that I have that separate from how to ship labs, which only a few people at the site even need to learn that. Why even have those slides for the people that don't need that? Or what about a 10-minute training on the mechanism of action of that drug? Because the PI is not going to do this. And maybe the PI doesn't even know. Oftentimes, I'll get a new study. We'll get it. The PI instantly asks me, well, what kind of drug is it? Oh, doc, I don't know yet. They only sent me a CDA and a feasibility. I have no clue. They're going to send the protocol. Then a few weeks go by, we get the protocol. The doctor even forgot he or she asked me that question. Because since then, we've gotten other studies. If the doc remembers, because he was particularly interested in that indication, which happens not so often, he may remind me, hey, what was that study drug again? Oh, it was this and that. Oh, the next thing he'll ask, well, what is that mechanism of action? Then you can see him trying to buffer in his head, and he wants me to interject, like, what's the mechanism of action? Doc, I don't know. I didn't even read the protocol yet. Like, we just have it. We have all these study startup docs. They're gonna come train us. So it'd be nice to have these things up front, like things like mechanism of action of the drug, adverse events of special interest, previous data on that drug, the important ones, not the entire investigator brochure. Like, I understand we need that, but the sponsors are expecting me or someone like me to parse through that and basically make this training for the rest of my staff. And newsflash, like, we're not doing this. We're not doing it. Even the most interested and scientifically pure site directors don't have the time for that. That's a luxury. So it'd be nice if the sponsors would do that. And there have been a few that have done this in the past. Hats off to them. I would mention them, but I don't want to get in trouble. But you already know which sponsors I like if you listen and watch enough. Point is, most of them should be doing it. Sub point to that is this should be a CRO thing to do. But everyone kind of, and this is one of my main gripes of this industry. Everyone knows kind of what would be nice, but everyone passes this off to the sites to where they expect the sites to like take all these raw ingredients, investigator brochure, protocol, slide deck from the SIVs, training log, and then all the other startup docs, create the source, put it all together, train the staff. Now you're expected to know mechanism of action, how to pitch it to a patient, how to pitch it to a doctor, how to pitch it to your own doctor. What's the mechanism of action? What's the AI of special interest? Like, somebody's got to go through all that stuff. It'd be so nice to have those things segmented in a learning management system and someplace where you can easily access it when you need it. It goes even further. A lot of these studies are so complex now, you have to have third-party vendors. So here we are in the vendors again, but this is the old school, like, pragmatic type of vendors. We need an MRI, we need a DEXA scan, we need a fibro scan, and we need a brain scan, and we need all these things. Most sites don't have that stuff in-house. Academic medical centers do, for the most part, but most sites don't have those things in-house. You got to outsource it to community vendors. So now I gotta go, or my coordinator's gotta go to vendor XYZ in our community, who, by the way, if you're in an underserved community, are busy as, right? Let me just emphasize that again. They don't care about reading 300-page slides where only five of those pages are relevant to them. Yet we're expected to train them, or even worse, they're expected to jump on a Zoom with a sponsor-appointed vendor who's going to train them on like a 45-minute Zoom. They want this training done in 5 minutes. This is not complicated stuff. If you need MRIs for your study, MRI vendors know how to do MRIs. That's literally all they do. There's not that many variations of what you could possibly ask for. And if there are, that's not a well-designed study because standard of care services like MRIs, X-rays, DEXAs, whatever, need to be the process. Right? Now, when they're not, when you need extra steps, the costs go up to everything. And then it's the imaging, because these are usually imaging vendors. It's the uploading of the data. How do they upload it? And then they give them access to this portal they've never heard of, where you got to try to log in 10 times before you actually get in. It texts them, it emails them, it goes to junk, it goes somewhere else. Meanwhile, they've got a line of their own patients waiting in the waiting room. And their tech, who's already overburdened, has essentially become a coordinator looking for logins to different portals. And when things don't work well, who do they come to? The sponsor. They come to the site and say, well, why is your vendor not doing their training? We sent them this many emails and they still haven't done it because they need a 5-minute video that they can access whenever they want, including 5 minutes before the patient's scheduled to be there, so they can remind themselves, okay, this is how what I'm supposed to do for this particular patient right now. When they come in for the MRI, I got to do this. Once they start doing enough, it's fine. And that's capturing the data. Now we got to talk about uploading it to some portal, God knows where. As a site, we try to do the uploading for them. Hey, MRI vendor, just collect the data, give me the CD-ROM. I'll take it and I'll upload it myself. A lot of times they can't do that. It has to be uploaded directly from the machine. So it gets harder. Costs run up. People ask, well, why are things so inefficient? Well, look how many freaking people you need just to collect an image. And it's not the same tech every time. And so I'm going on a rant a little bit, but it's like, what do sites want? Well, they want all this shit to be easier, right? The argument is because of the fact that it's not easy is why it's scarce. And it's why site owners do well when they could actually figure it out, which I can see to that point. But I do think the information could be presented at least in an easier way for me to go train not just my immediate staff that work for me, but also my vendor staff that don't work for me. When an MRI technician doesn't upload an image the proper way, they're not my employee. I can't get mad at them. I don't yell at my own employees as is, but there's no repercussion. Like I can't tell them, hey, if you can't do this right, I'm gonna fire you. In an underserved community like Yuma, there's not another vendor option. Even in some of the bigger cities, there's not another vendor option. From the sponsors or CROs, I would request just fragmented, better streamlined learning and more practical training so that we can access it not just once and memorize it. We're not machines, but to have it easily accessible. Okay, here's a 5 minute video. Like I had to go make slides for my x-ray vendors on several studies because the image acquisition process was so different from standard of care. The tech asked our coordinators every time, well, how are they supposed to capture it? What kind of angle do you need? What resolution? All this stuff. I don't know. Let's make a 5 page slide so you can see it. And then I begged the sponsor to make a training video, and they finally did. This is what sites want. This is the state of the industry that we're in. I don't know if this podcast really had a point other than to be a rant formulation of a greater idea I haven't come up with yet. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.